Jill, Frank, and I decided to perform our music as much as possible in 1984. We played open mics and scheduled dates at the North Star Bar, Perimeter 2 Coffee House, the Bothy Club, and the Walt Whitman Center. Our first proper concert recital was held at the Philadelphia Classical Guitar Society on October 28, 1984. It was unusual for the Guitar Society to have a local ensemble play mostly original compositions. I remember it being a bit nerve-wracking and at the same time exciting, playing for fellow classical guitarists in the area. We also returned to the Widener studio, but this time with tape rolling, we played for a live audience. Things were moving ahead. The music scene in the mid-1980s in Philadelphia was pretty open to one alternative. We were accepted by folk, classical, jazz, and rock listeners. It got to a point where it was decided that the next step was to make a record. At this point, the compact disc wasn't widely available, so vinyl was the way to go. Guidance for the project came from John Venor and his company, Acoustical Concepts. We recorded everything live at Widener Studios. The project took a great deal of work and it was very expensive to press vinyl. But doing this showed how serious one alternative was at moving to the next level. The whole process of making an album started on June 18, 1985, with Jill, Frank, and me recording 5 tunes in one day. And you'll notice that there is another guitarist in these photos. His name, Len Doyle. Just previous to recording, Frank let Jill and me know that he was planning on continuing his music studies, this time in composition, at Temple University. This meant that his energies were not going to be focused on the trio or the recording itself. So with Frank's blessing, I asked Len to record 3 of the pieces to assure the best outcome for the album. The album's title, named after my home in Embryville, Pennsylvania, Green Lawn. On January 17, 1986, 1,000 copies of Green Lawn arrived at my doorstep. The previous 8 months of detailed work and big periods of patiently waiting produced a recording that I was very proud of. The front cover had the Yin Yang logo prominently displayed. The back cover has a great endorsement from Gene Shea that we hoped would entice music lovers to check out the recording. I had a plan to get the word out about Green Lawn, but there was an immediate problem that needed attention. Frank was definitely bowing out of the group, so the search was on for his replacement. Jill and I asked Len if he would join, and he actually wanted to, but had other commitments, so we had to find someone else. After asking around, we came up with the name of a really good guitarist, Jim Mardinley, and started working with him in October of 1985. We felt lucky to have Jim join because Green Lawn had just arrived and I was hoping to get as much accomplished exposure-wise as possible. Jim allowed one alternative to continue performing, build an audience, and stay creative into the future. My plan for Green Lawn was to send as many copies as possible out to college radio stations all over the US and Canada. College radio was very independent and open to many styles of music at the time. As a result, a great deal of airplay was given to Green Lawn, as seen through these postcards that were returned to me from the stations. Getting a review in a major newspaper was another goal. Green Lawn received a very complimentary review from Jonathan Takeoff of the Philadelphia Daily News, saying that it was the tastiest independent record project to come out of these parts in many moons. Tom DiNardo, the classical music writer of the Daily News, wrote, "Here's a group that deserves a lot of credit, sticking to its music despite its lack of chart-busting commerciality." We also received a lengthy review from Susan Pena of the Reading Eagle. Trying to get Green Lawn the distribution and push it deserved, I sent it to Marian Layton of Rounder Records. As she did before, a polite rejection note was sent back. I also tried the eclectic label None Such Records. They took a pass. And of course, I had to try Windham Hill, but there was little interest. These next few photos were taken at Philadelphia's famed and now extinct Chestnut Cabaret on July the 10th, 1986, when we opened up for the amazing group Oregon. We felt it quite an honor because Oregon was, and still is, very influential both musically and philosophically to One Alternative. A friend told me that as we were playing our set, the members of Oregon sat at the bar and attentively watched. A few months later, we returned to the cabaret on September the 10th, and we opened up for master drummer Billy Cobham. By October of 1986, another change in the One Alternative lineup occurred. Jim was let go due to musical differences. We needed someone to gel more with the direction we were taking. A guitarist just out of college named Peter Sittler came to our attention. He was a classical guitarist who also had a rock and jazz background, just what we needed. Starting in January of 1987, One Alternative had a number of gigs and radio appearances that helped get the trio ready for an important playing date in New York City. We were invited by John Schaefer of WNYC to come up and play at the Merkin Concert Hall. This concert was part of the series of his New Sounds radio show. What was even more exciting was that it was broadcast live around the country on National Public Radio. In May, we returned to the Chestnut Cabaret, this time opening for the progressive rock group Renaissance on their farewell tour. One Alternative also played outdoor concerts and festivals by this time. In July of 1988, we opened for the jazz group Spyro Gyra at the Reading Jazz Fest in what was probably our biggest audience to date of about 2,000. The high-profile gigs, plus the reviews and radio airplay that Greenlawn was receiving, encouraged us to go ahead and make a second recording that was to be called Take Note. I wanted to crank things up a notch with a slight musical enhancement. The title track starts with an oboe melody and guitar accompaniment. The aural soundscape is abruptly changed by the entrance of drums and bass. I took on the bass playing chores, and a good friend from our Temple and Kevin Roth days, Lou Abbott, played the drums. We used these additional instruments on about half of the tunes. My hope was that One Alternative might find a bigger audience with a bigger sound. We recorded Take Note from February through June of 1988 at Widener and released it in November. Reaction, for the most part, was positive, with some wishing that we had stayed with the trio format exclusively. The biggest music review to date came from the internationally respected music industry magazine, Billboard. Take Note also got a good deal of national airplay through the syndicated radio program Portraits in Sound. New radio networks like The Wave and The Breeze also played cuts from Take Note. At this time, Jill Pete and I played a couple of fun gigs with Lou and bassist Jim Stager, but One Alternative still essentially remained a trio. It is worth mentioning at this point that Jill was asked by Will Ackerman, the founder of Windham Hill Records, to record an oboe part on a piece that he titled The Prospect of Darrow's Barn and the Blossoming of an Apple Spring on Imaginary Road. Jill, along with her now husband and fabulous guitarist David Cullen, have continued working with Will on numerous recording projects and performances ever since.